Hi, welcome back. In this episode, we're going to permanently delete our fuel pump on our Yamaha Silverado. This is a 1700. It'll be the same process or almost identical on the 1600 version, assuming that you have carburetor, that you're not the newer models that are fuel injection. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification button, and also check me out on Instagram at Clara Garage. Let's get started. Alright, first thing we got to do is take off our chrome cover. So there's two screws in the bottom of it. I've already removed them. So it just pulls straight off. So that's the two screw location. And if you pull your choke out, it makes it a lot easier to get the other screw out. And then there should be a little hook coming down from here, and there should be a little material-ish rubber band type of thing that it should catch on. Mine's broken off and that part's missing, so it's getting old, I guess. So you might have to kind of lift yours up or play with that to get to pull out. And then the next thing we're going to want to do is shut off our fuel. We want to make sure our fuel's off, but then we're going to get this electrical connector unplugged. So all you got to do is just kind of squeeze in on that and pull it, and then it should come out for us, no problem. And then the next thing we're going to want to do is get these clamps slid off, and on the outline as well. You might need pliers. Mine have been on and off enough, I guess, so it's not too bad. And then now we can pull our fuel lines off. So we're going to lose a little bit of fuel maybe. So both fuel lines are off. Typically you'd have a bunch of fuel run out when you do that. I made a couple other videos to help people out when they broke down on the side of the road and that kind of stuff. Or if you wanted to just remove your, if you want to just replace your fuel pump, I made a video on that too. I'm just kind of recording them all together. So that's why this was already pretty much dry and good to go. And then we're going to pull our fuel pump completely out. So easiest way is get your fuel line kind of out of there, and then kind of jiggle this up, and it will pull right out. Alright, now that's out. If your lines are all full of gas, it's not a bad idea to have some safety glasses on in case it splashes in the eye. And now I'm going to pull the pump out. So I'm just going to use a screwdriver and kind of get it underneath the band, kind of work it around. There's a good chance your fuel pump's been on for quite a while, so the band might be kind of stuck to it, so you got to get it kind of loosened off. Even putting a little bit of lubrication or something isn't always a bad idea. So you kind of get it in. And then it takes a few minutes. Sometimes it can be a bit of a pain. But once you get it over that ridge, it seems to be not too bad. And I always go away from the electrical connectors, or the electrical wires there. And if you were replacing it, you would do the same thing. You would put it back on. You wouldn't run the electrical wires through and run the risk of damaging them. Now once you start getting over that ridge, it's really not too bad. It's just the hardest part's getting it over that ridge initially. And you just kind of work back and forth. And then there's the pump out of our way. If you haven't changed your fuel filter in a while, you're into it now. It's a good time to replace your fuel filter. They're relatively cheap. I know some people, they like to clean this side of the motor up, so they want to remove that chrome cover and all this stuff. I think it looks okay, so I'm going to keep this stuff all in the factory location. I know I don't got to worry about it getting hot on the engine and melting and starting a fire and that kind of stuff, so works out good for that too. And then these two slots here, they go on those forks. So I'm gonna shove that back on. Still works, a little bit more floppy, but I think it'll be okay. And now we gotta join our lines back together. So there's a few different ways you could do it. If you're relocating the fuel filter, you'll end up just coming out of the out into this line, or putting a new line from the carburetor up to there while you're into it. I'm going to keep the filter in the stock location. So here's a couple of pictures of how I ran the fuel lines. I did it two different ways. This is using the factory filter. I bent up a short little chunk of brake line. And then this is using an aftermarket filter, smallest one I could get, and just going straight down. Both methods seem to work pretty good. One thing I liked about the factory filter was that the inner diameter was bigger than the inner diameter on the aftermarket one, but both work pretty well. Alright, that cover's on. It looks just like factory again. And now our next step, we're going to move to the fuel tank, because we got to get more airflow. So when I was on the side of the road, when I eliminated it, I wasn't getting enough air from the tank on the vent line, so it wasn't gravity feeding properly, and I was losing fuel, and I was starting to lean out. So I ended up putting just a piece of tape on here. So I just had a piece of tape that would hold this. This here makes your seal so gas doesn't leak out, just to allow a little bit of air to suck in through the tank, so it wasn't sucking in through the vent line good enough. And then I would just put it back in. I would just kind of set it like so. Just like that. And then when I ended up getting some rain, I ended up just taping it around like so, so it was so rain couldn't run down and in and into the tank. So we're going to address that. The hole on the vent line is very small, and it plugs fairly easily, and it doesn't really allow a good free flow. So we got to take our console and everything off, and then I'm hoping I can leave the tank on and get a drill bit into there with the steering turned, but I might have to pull the tank back a bit to access it. So we'll find out when we get into there. So I'm going to get this stuff off camera, and we'll go from there. Alright, I got the gauges off, and I got the tank moved back. So now we can access the vent line and drill that hole a little bit bigger. Oh, and for taking your gauge cluster off and taking the tank off, if you're not sure how to do it, that's episode 24. And then putting the tank and gauge cluster back on is episode 31, and episode 32 is resetting the clock. So as you can see, it's pretty tiny. There it is right there. You can see a little tiny hole in there, almost non-existent. So we're going to carefully drill that out, not to get a lot of, or hopefully any shavings into the tank. I'm going to just drill nice and slow, and then I'm going to take my vacuum and just vacuum up the shavings best I can, and maybe I might even run a magnet along there to try to get any shavings that I missed. I'm going to start with a 1/8 drill bit, and I'm going to go from there. Alright, we got our hole drilled. It went pretty good. So as we can see, it's much bigger now. And when we blow on it, we have much better airflow. So that should be good enough to keep everything flowing nice. There's not really much room to go any bigger, so I'm going to call that good. If I have any issues, I will let you guys know, but this should work out very well. Done with this portion. But it will be easier to access the carburetor with the tank off. So we will get the tank more out of our way probably, and then we're able to access the carburetor. Alright, so I've already started stripping stuff down. So episode 4 is the air filter for taking it off. But if you want the quick cliff notes for it, you got 3 bolts you got to take out there. 1, 2, and 3. And then you got to get in with a Phillips screwdriver and loosen that off. And then you have the line that goes on here. Has a clamp on it, so you just gotta get that clamp off and the line pulls off, and then the whole air box will remove. It's fully gassed, and I have some lights on here for my underglow lights, and I didn't feel like getting into the wiring and disconnecting them, so I just have it secured on the back and propped up. It gives me enough room to work. So the fuel pump's eliminated, the bike's been running okay, but in the very top end, it's lacking a bit, which is the reason I'm taking the carburetor off to put a bigger needle in the seat in. Alright, so I've kind of gone ahead and started loosening a few things off and getting stuff ready. So this is the line that went to the air box right here. And then I've already loosened off the nuts for the throttle cables, and they just will slip out like that. Then we'll be able to slip them off the carburetor. So we're on the right side of the bike. We're gonna have to remove the throttle cables, and then we also got to remove the adjuster for the idle. So we should be able to just push up on that and then pull it right through this bracket. So there's that off. And then, so we're going to worry about those throttle cables once we get the carburetor out a little further, so it'll be easier to get to everything, so we won't have the jug of the cylinder kind of blocking us. So now we're going to go on to the other side of the bike. We have a few things on this side that we need to disconnect, so we're able to pull the carburetor right out on the other side. So I'm going to open up this fuel line right here, and we're going to open up the clamp and put a little bit of tape on it to get dirt on, and that will pull through. And then up here we got 2 electrical connectors right here and here. We're going to open those up. One of them goes to the throttle positioning sensor, and the other one goes to the carburetor heater. So when we get those out, we should be able to pull everything through. And then our last thing is our choke. So we got to get that off too. So this nut here, I've already loosened it off. It's a 17 millimeter wrench. So you can just loosen that right off, pull it through, and then you can just pull it out. As you can see, the hole is slotted. So now your whole choke assembly will all pull through to the other side as well. And now we're going to open up these electrical connectors. There's one, and the other one's a little bit easier style. It's just a 2-prong. Then we'll just open up this fuel line. And that should be everything for this side. So now we should be able to go back to the other side and pull things through. Alright, so we should have everything loose that we should be able to pull the carburetor out. There's a little clamp behind the carburetor that I'll show you once the carburetor's off, because I won't be able to get the camera in to see with the carburetor on to show you where it is. And it's just a number 3 Allen key. So I was able to just use my Allen key to get in there. I think I got it loose enough, so hopefully it will all pull out. There's carburetor free. And everything else wanting to come with it, which is good. So now we can slide our throttle cables off. That's the back. And then this one here is the front. Now we just gotta gently jiggle all our connectors and everything through. Keep in mind of where things were routed so you can route them back in the same spot again. Alright, so there is our carburetor. So they're fairly simple-ish. So you got your choke cable right here. And then we got our fuel line right here. And then this 3-prong connector goes to our throttle position sensor right there. So as you give it gas, it sees, since it shows where the computer where the butterfly is. And then we got this 2-prong connector here. That's for the carburetor heater right down here on the bottom. And then right here we have our throttle, or our right here we have our idle adjustment. So you turn it or forward or backwards, left or right to change the idle. And then right here, this is our accelerator pump. I'm not sure if there's enough fuel in here or not, but when I give it throttle, if there's fuel in the accelerator pump, it will shoot out of this little guy here. We'll see if it will go. I'm not sure if you've seen that little squirt or not. A lot of the gas ran out of the bowl. So for the most part, that's this carburetor in a nutshell. Whenever you have your intake opened up, it's always good to make sure you're keeping dirt out. So I'm just going to shove a clean rag into it so no dirt or fibers or anything can get in. So just like that, just to keep anything out. And then right here, you can see that that's the number 3 Allen key that you got to loosen off for the backside of the carburetor. This is your carb boot right here that goes to the 2 cylinders. So it wasn't too bad to get it off. You might be able to leave your tank on to do it, but this gives a little bit more room to see, and it definitely gives a little more room to work. But with the cameras trying to record it, it's nice having a little extra visibility. Alright, so we're over at the workbench now. So we got to take the bowl off to get to the needle and seat. So it's 4 screws on the bottom. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 holding the bowl on. And then on the carb heater right here, we got to just loosen that off just a hair because the bracket's going to hit the bottom of the bowl. So to take the bowl off, we got to take out the screws on the bowl. So here's 1, 2, 3, if you can see that, and then the 4th one's there. And then the carb heater, the bracket, it is just slightly in the way, so you just gotta pull this off. So you pull that off, and then you can get your 10 mil wrench onto it, like so. Break it free, and then you're able to spin that bracket out of the way enough so you can get the bowl off. You always be careful when you're taking stuff apart, especially with this. You know, there's always small parts in that inside carburetor, so you want to make sure you don't drop anything. You have a clean area. Otherwise, it could take you forever to find the pieces that you dropped. Alright, so that's the bowl. Looks pretty clean on the inside actually. That looks pretty good. You have a little gasket on here, but we're pretty happy with it. This is your accelerator pump. If you push down on that, gas is going to squirt out of there. So make sure that your O-ring's there and it looks okay. And also if you hit it, make sure you have glasses on in case it gets in your eye. You don't want that to happen. Alright. Now, this is our float right here. So when, right now the carburetor is upside down, so when you have no fuel in it, it'd be sitting like that, opening up your needle and seed. And as it fills with fuel, it'll float up and then close off your needle and seed. So we're going to take this screw out now. So we get that screw out. And then the float will come out. But with the float, there's also this pivot shaft that it rides on. So that's what works up and down. And then our needle and seed, or our needles on the bottom of that too. So just keep an eye on that. Alright. So looking at it now, right here is the seat. So we're going to have to take that screw out so we can pull the seat out. And like right here is our fuel line coming in. So the fuel comes in, gets to this needle and seat. If the bowl is low or empty, the needle and seat will be open and it will allow fuel to flow in. And then as it fills up, it closes, blocking the flow of fuel so it doesn't flood the carburetor. So we're going to take that out now. Got that screw out. Can't quite get it with your fingers, so I'm just going to use a pair of pliers real gently. Little twist action. And there it is. That's the seat, and this is the part that we got to change. We're going to change this and the needle. You should always change both at the same time together. You should never do one or the other. Always replace both at the same time. So the new one that we have is bigger. The part number I got for it is 2C6-14190-30. I believe this is for a Yamaha Grizzly four-wheeler or whatever. I believe the dealer said that that's what it's out of. So when it gets shipped, there's this rubber on here. I've already had this off once, but it took me a few minutes to get the rubber off. It was kind of a pain. And there's our new needle and seat. So this is the old one. This is the new one. I'm side by side down here. So just looking at it, you can see that the old one is round all the way. And then the new one, at least one that I got, is not perfectly round. I'm not sure you can see that there's two flat sides on it. And then when you look at it upside down, they're the same, so they'll fit. It's round, the O-rings are the same, the height of them are both the same. That's important to check. So they're identical, other than the casing above the O-ring is a slightly different shape, and the actual needle size is a different shape, or a different size. So looking through it, you can see the one more to the left, closer to the palm of my hand. The hole is significantly bigger than the one further away from the palm of my hand. So this one here is a 2mm opening, and then this one here is a 3mm opening to allow more fuel into the carburetor for wide open throttle, so we're not starving for fuel. And then looking into it, this is where it goes in. You just want to give everything a good check, make sure everything's clean. Alright, so everything looks good, so we're going to put the new seat in. So when we put it in, the O-ring part, that's the end that goes down. And then we want to make sure that where the screw is, that's where this portion is, so we can lock it down in place. Otherwise, there's that option that it could start to spin out and actually fall out, and then it will just free flow fuel and it'll be really bad. So we're just going to slip it in nice and gently. And it should be just slightly snug when you do it. So now that's sitting nice. And then we can put our screw back in. Perfect. So you want to make sure that it's snug, but you don't want to over tighten it and snap it or strip the threads. That'd be really bad. As you can see, there's the needle in the seat, and then there's our screw in. And you can see those two flat sections are on either side of the screw, so we have good contact surface with that little lip. And these are the two needles. They're both the same length. They look pretty much identical. I know it's hard to see. This one has a yellow tinge to it. That's the old one. It's probably just from the fuel. So you're gonna take your needle and you're gonna slip it around this portion so it's dangling down. So it's just like that. You can kind of see it dangling there. So this is actually up, but the carburetor is upside down. So right now it's down, but this is actually the top of the carburetor here, and the bowl sitting right here. And now we can slip this in, just like so. And then we can take our screw and we can put it back in to lock that shaft in place. All right. So that's what you should have now. So that shaft, it goes across, and then the screw right there, it locks it in. And then you can see the little portion of the needle and seat, or the needle right there. And this is going to just move like this. And I'm putting the old needle seat back into there so it's protected. So if I ever need it for something, it's good and I got it. And now our next step is to put our bowl back on. So we're just going to inspect our gaskets, make sure they look okay. They look good. It looks clean on the inside, no debris or anything like that, so we're pretty happy. And then you just got to make sure that the accelerator pump goes on the proper side. So this should only fit, the bowl will only fit one way. So even just looking at the way it's notched out, you can look at the float and you should be able to figure out how it goes back together. it should just slip down nice. If you have to force anything or it doesn't slip into place nice, there's something holding it up. So stop and double check. And now we can put all our screws back in. I always like to get them all started before I start to snug them up. Alright, and now we can re-snug up the carb heater. We're going to check the float level. So we may be getting back into this if the float is off a bit. But we're going to be optimistic and hope that it's good. And then one other thing I'm going to do while I have the carburetor off, I'm going to replace this piece here. So as you can see, it's pretty cracked and doesn't look the greatest. Oh, it's all kind of cracking all in here. So I got a new one. There it is there. The part number on it was 3LD149580000. And it was a pricey little part. It was $36. So it's not the cheapest thing. But we're going to change it. So all this does is for coasting and cruising or whatever, it just helps to keep the fuel mixture proper. So it's just two Phillips screws, and there is a spring in here, so keep that in mind. So if you just keep your thumb on it, you should be able to take those screws right out. And then just lift it up slowly. There's the spring. And it does look like that crack has migrated all the way into the cover. So looking at it, you can kind of see, it's probably really hard to see on the camera, but you can kind of see all along this portion that is showing signs of a crack. So it may or may not have been sucking air through there. So you want to look in here. You want to check this diaphragm gasket, make sure it's in good shape. Make sure there's no dirt or debris or anything on the seal. And then these are the screw holes right there. But then this is a little chamber that will allow gas to pass through. So everything looks okay in there, so we're going to throw the new one on. Yeah, this cover is called the coasting enriching cover. So as your coasting is working off of some vacuum to add more fuel if it needs it. So it's going to be too hard to see on the camera. You got a little hole here, and it's just a little tiny pinhole on the other side. The spring is held in place by that. But it's good, there's no cracks or anything, so it'll be in good shape. And I am going to keep the other cover. I'll probably never use it again, but in a real pinch, it might get me out of a bind. And this carburetor has a little over 185,000 kilometers on it, so it's getting up there in mileage. And this is the first time it's ever been apart. So now reverse order, we're going to put that spring on, make sure that we line up on that groove. And then we're going to hold it down to get our screws started. There's one screw. And then there's the other screw started. So once they're started, you can let go and it's not going to go flying. But this is a common part to crack on the carburetor, and it could give you some issues. So if yours looks really bad, it's not a bad idea to change it. But as far as I know, my bike was running fine. I wasn't having any issues with it. And you don't want to over tighten and crack it either because they're so pricey. That's probably good there. Alright. So now our next step is to check the fuel level. So if the fuel level's off, then we're going to have to reopen the carburetor up on the bottom and just make some adjustments to the float. And it's just kind of trial and error at that point. But we're going to cross our fingers and hope that the level's good. Otherwise, that tab on the that tab where the needle is sitting, so this was the tab and this is the needle here, you just got to bend it up or down depending, so it either opens sooner or later. I have it set up in the vise, and then I have a line coming from the drain. It's kind of hard to see. That's the drain plug is a number 5 Allen key, and then that line comes over to the front, and then we can see our fuel level. This has been moving on me a little bit, so it's not 100% accurate anymore. And then I had another line on the fuel, and I've been holding it up like that, filling it up. But this is the gist of it. I'm going to, when I get this on the bike, I'm going to redo it again because I have it on the stand. Everything should be sitting good and exactly how it is, and I'm going to triple check it before I get absolutely everything hooked up and see how it goes. So we're going to move back to the bike and we're going to start installing it. Oh, and when we're doing it, we're going off of the flange line on the bowl. Oh, that's actually looking fairly close. For the 04s and up, the level should be 0.4 to 0.5 millimeter above the float chamber mating surface, and that's 0.16 to 0.2 of an inch. The 03s and older, they're a different level, so it's recommended, all the reading I've done online for the older models, to raise it up a little bit. So keep that in mind. If it's a 04 and up, the level's already set a little bit higher than what it is on the older models, and you're probably okay. But if your float level is too low, you'll run lean, And if your float level is too high, you'll run really rich. So keep that in mind. If your bike's running differently or acting funny, that could be part of your issue. So we're going to go and get this back on the bike, and then we're going to redo this test with it on the bike and make sure everything's still good. Alright, so we're going to start putting everything back together. So we're going to go basically reversed order. So we're going to take our rag out. Make sure there's no dirt or anything in there. That feels pretty good, looks pretty good. So now we're going to shove all of these to the other side of the bike. So we got our fuel line, we got our choke, we got our carb heater, and we got our throttle position sensor. And then the idle adjustment stays on this side. And I left this on, so when I get it in, I can put it over, and then I can double check the fuel level in the bowl before I finish putting it all the way back together. So we're just going to slip it in, and then slip this portion into the boot. And then before we get too far, we're going to get our throttle cables on. This was the front. It just slips in and around. And this was the back. Same thing, just in and then around. And that goes there. And that goes there. And the carb's just loosely sitting there. I'm going to make sure nothing's binding us up on the other side. And then I'm going to come over and push it the rest of the way in. Alright, we look not too bad on the other side, so we're going to work it in a little bit further. I want to make sure that we're sitting level. So that looks pretty good there. And now we're going to tighten the clamp on the inside there so the carburetor can't fall off. Alright, that feels pretty good, and that was with our number 3. And now we're going to go to the other side, and we're going to connect our fuel line. We still got to do our other connectors and everything, but we just want to triple check the fuel level in this bowl before we get any further. Just in case on the workbench it didn't go perfect. Things were kind of moving on me a bit. But this is on the bike how it's going to be sitting, so this is the best spot. Only bummer is that if it's not right, we got to pull it back off. Alright, so I threw an Allen key onto the drain bolt on the bowl. So once we get the fuel line hooked up and the fuel open, we'll let the bowl fill up, and then I can open that up and we can see how our level's doing. Alright, so the fuel line's reconnected. And now we'll go back to the other side, and we'll make sure that we have everything where we want it. Then we'll turn the fuel on, and then we'll start checking the level of the bowl again. So now we'll be able to see our level here. I'm going to turn the fuel on. I'm going to wait a minute, and then I'm going to crack open that drain on the bottom of the bowl, and we'll see the level come up. But there is gas in the bowl. When I hit the accelerator pump, there's fuel. Alright, so I'm going to, we have a big air pocket in here, so I'm just going to kind of let the air out and then back up. And it's holding a nice level. And even if I let it go higher than it should, so there's gas up to here, I bring it up, the gas is settling. And the gas stopped right there, which is right where we want it. So I'm going to call that good. And we can do that again, just for demonstration. So as you can see, the gas is right at the top. I'm going to raise it up. You can see the gas going to the level, and that's pretty much right about where we want it. So I'm going to call that good there. I'll tuck this. Alright, so that line is closed now. This is what I was using to reach it. Once I got it broke free, I could take the universal joint off. But that's how I was able to reach it from the other side. So now we can get this gas line off. And now we can get our idler adjuster back in place. So we're just going to slide it underneath that bracket. And then back up. And it just pushes down and clips in. And that's good now. And now we can tighten our throttle cables. Just so we know that we're good there. That's all good. So we're done on this side, other than the air box, and we're not going to show that on this video. Alright, so now we can plug our cables back in. So I'm going to plug the throttle position cable in first, and the connector will only go in one way. Make sure you get past the lock. And then we'll get the other cable for the carb heater plugged in. The same thing, make sure you're past the lock and it grabs. And then this cable here, that's just our old fuel pump wiring. And there was a tie wrap going around here, so we're going to add another tie wrap on right now. We're just going to go around just so it doesn't, so they don't sit on the head. I'm going to tuck that old fuel pump one in there too. We're not going to need that anymore. And now we're going to slide our choke cable in. And then we'll just snug that up with our 17 mil. So we should be able to fire this up. Make sure it runs, so we give it some choke. Everything's connected. I'm just going to lower this tank down a little bit. Put our key in. And yes, your bike will run without the cluster on it. Now we'll try firing it up. Alright, bike runs, it seems not bad, so we can finish getting it back together, get everything closed up, and take it for a test drive, but it looks like we're pretty good. So I was giving it a little bit of gas there from the little tiny silver piece. So from this guy right here, you should have seen that shooting fuel. And then this slide with the vacuum, it was working up, and that's how you get your bigger carburetor. It's almost like the old 4-barrel carburetors with vacuum secondary. It's kind of the same thing. So having the smaller opening just gives you better drivability at lower throttle, and when you start to open it up, you get your full bore. And then That butterfly back there, that's worked off of your throttle. It's hard to see, but it's worked off your throttle there, and this is worked off the vacuum. Alright, bike's all together. Seems to be good. I still need to take it for a test drive, but everything else for the fuel pump delete's already been done for a few weeks. The needle in the seat and the carb was my last step I had to do, so I have pretty good faith that everything's going to be good to go. If I have any issues, I'll add it in before I post it, but I'm pretty confident we're going to be in good shape and the bike's going to be nice and reliable again. So I've had this completed for a while. I never had a chance to get all the testing that done that I wanted to get done to 1000% have all the answers that you may be asking, but I got a lot of it done. So I'm going to talk about a few key points. This is going to be kind of like a little bit of a summary. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fuel line routing. So when I originally did it, I came off the fuel filter, and then there's that factory line that would have looped over to the fuel pump, and I just put a little sleeve in there to join that to the factory line going to the carburetor, and that worked great when I had to come all the way back from the East Coast there, back to central Canada, and but every time I stopped the bike, I'd run it. I was getting gas a little bit sooner than I normally would, just because I was concerned about running out of fuel, because it was a change to the bike that I hadn't tested. So every time I stopped, I was filling the tank up full, and then I kept driving, and it worked great, other than I did some driving around in one town, and my tank was pretty low, and it was a lot of stop and go traffic, and it got pretty hot. Then I stopped and I ran into a store to get some stuff, and then when I came back out, the bike had sat for about 15 minutes or so, and I had a hard time getting it to run again. It had fired up, and then I went to go drive away, and I didn't get out of the parking lot, and it died, and then it was acting like it wasn't getting fuel. So I thought it boiled the fuel in the carburetor, things got hot or something, I got a vapor lock, and it was fine for a while after that, but every time the tank was getting low, I was at a gas station filling it up. But when I got home and started doing more regular driving again, and I usually let my tank get pretty low when I was trying to test the tank getting to reserve and that kind of stuff. I want to see how that would react without a fuel pump. And I started noticing that I wasn't getting fuel, and so I started looking into it, and what I ended up finding was that there wasn't enough fuel pressure to open up the needle and seed. It was the needle and seed weren't sticking or anything. It was just that there wasn't enough fuel pressure. And I found if I ran it on reserve, especially if I was getting like below half a tank or more, if I ran it on reserve versus running it on just regular on for the fuel shutoff, that it was a little bit better. So that's why I ended up rerouting the lines. I went to first that red aftermarket filter coming straight down, and I never had any issues at all with that. I ran it for a while there. I was running it in reserve all the time, whether it's full tank or getting close to empty, but it was working pretty good. And I tried it in and I tried it with being on just regular on, and it was good too. And in both cases, under wide open throttle and everything, I never had any issues with starving of fuel, other than when you got really up into the fifth gear top end doing a mediocre pull or whatever. At certain speeds you could start to notice it, but if you were just cruising along the highway at freeway speeds at 75, 80 mile an hour, and you hit the throttle, the bike still wanted to go, so it was getting lots of fuel, which was good. And then the first picture that I showed, that's the way the bike's sitting right now, with the factory filter still in, and then the little chunk of brake line coming out and onto the other factory line, and that's holding the line up, because because the line was drooped a bit when I first originally did it. So now I have that line high up as I can get it to help with fuel flow. Because the factory fuel pump puts out around 2 psi of pressure, and we're probably running less than half a psi or less than a quarter psi of pressure. Because every 28 inches of water column is 1 psi, and gas is lighter than water, so it would be even more. I'm not sure exactly what it would be, but we only have like 6 inches or so of rise from the bottom of the tank to the carburetor, so we don't have very much pressure in the line when you're getting low. So that was with that little bit extra, with having to climb up a little bit, was too much. So when you run your line, you want to try to get it so it's as straight as a shot as possible to the carburetor. That is up high. You don't want it to be down at all. So that's one thing I found. But when I did run into that issue, the easiest way I found to get it going in a hurry was I just take my key and I take the gas cap off, and then I would, because you just need a little more pressure to forward bias that needle and seat to get it to open up, just because it just wasn't enough pressure when the tank was almost empty the way it had originally run. So I just take a deep breath in and then put my mouth around my lips into the side of the tank there and just give it a good blow once or twice. Just make sure you come all the way back to take your breath in. You don't want to breathe the gas fumes. And then that would allow the gas to flow into the bowl, and then it would be fine again for riding. So it was kind of a weird issue I had, but I checked the carb a few times. There's nothing going on in there. Everything was okay. And it happened both with the factory needle and seat in and with the larger needle and seat in. But when I changed and rerouted the gas lines to the way that they're routed in those pictures, I seemed to have no issues, and it seemed to be okay running both regular and on reserve. But if you're concerned, run on reserve and you're for sure good. But this is all I do. I just take a deep breath in and then give a good long blow once or twice, and it would get fuel into the carb. And then I just twist the throttle a couple times to make sure there's gas there, and then give it a try, and it would go. So I just go like this. So I do that, and that would push the fuel into the carburetor, and it worked out pretty well. So if you have that issue, just do that and then reroute your lines when you get home, or dig deeper into it. So yeah, so that was one issue I had. But like I said, with the lines routed the way they were in those pictures, I didn't have any issues other than one time I was riding in the rain. I still haven't changed my vent line, and it decided to choke it out. So I had to take the gas cap off, and I just gave it a breath because it was on the side of the highway, and then kept going with no issues. But it was most likely because I haven't changed that vent line yet. That's one thing I need to do this winter, because my vent line is starting to collapse. The drilling the hole bigger in the tank, you can always try running without the fuel pump and see if you have any issues throughout a whole tank. And if you have no issues, you might not need to make your hole bigger. I did, but part of it might also be that my vent line, I think, is collapsing. I'm going to find out this winter. I'm going to pull the tank off, and I'm going to put a new vent line in there, just because it's giving me a little bit of grief. And I think that's caused a couple of my little issues that I had for running on the highway and then starving for fuel. I think it was caused by that. Because when I looked into it, that's what it looked like it was doing. So that's one thing I'm going to change this winter, is that vent line, and then in the spring I'll know for sure if it's better or not. But you might be able to avoid not drilling your vent bigger. You can try it, and if you have issues, just know that's what you need to do. You can always do like what I did originally, was put some tape underneath the gas cap to make sure you can make it home without having to pull over lots. After changing the needle and seat, I didn't really notice much of a difference in performance or anything. I think if you're running 03 and older, I think you'd notice more of a difference, because when you go in there, you're also going to raise your float level. And I think just raising the float level is enough to eliminate the starving for fuel that people talk about in the forums and the top end. Because I didn't find any difference between the 2mm needle and seat and the 3mm needle and seat. With both needle and seats, I was running on the highway 75, 80 mile an hour, and when you rolled on it, there's power there every time. It was never starving for fuel. So I don't think that the needle and seat is as much of the starving for fuel as much as just getting the float level up. If you have the older models, I think will make a huge difference. But if you're already getting into it, it doesn't hurt to change the needle and seat. But if you have the newer models, the 04 and newer, and you're leery about getting into your carburetor, or you just don't want to touch it or spend the money on the needle and seat, I would try just running with the 2mm needle and seat, because your fuel level is already higher in the carburetor compared to the 03 and olders. And unless you have an issue, then get into it. Because for my bike, under wide open throttle, cruising, and top end, it all seemed about the same. Maybe in the top end, an extra 5 mile an hour type of thing, but it wasn't anything too crazy. So that part, depending on your year, I think the bigger thing is getting that float level up. So I don't think you'll have any issues if you have the newer models, for sure, if you run the 2mm versus the 3mm. But if you do want to change it, it was pretty easy to change, actually. It went pretty smooth. So I'm in Northern Ontario, and our speed limits are pretty slow compared to Southern Ontario and riding in the States and that. On the freeways, the speed limit is quite a bit higher. So we're in my area, the speed limit's around 90 kilometer, which is about 55 mile an hour. And I found cruising at those speeds, I was actually burning noticeably amount less fuel than when I had the fuel pump on the bike. I never had a chance to do much testing and verifying after I put the bigger needle and seat in that it was still the case. But it was definitely burning less with the 2mm needle and seat. So in the spring, I'll be able to get out and get some good rides in this area, and I'll be able to see if the 3mm needle and seat gives the same mileage at those speeds or close to it as the 2mm did, because it was significantly better mileage that I was getting once I got back into northern-ish Ontario, there where the speed limit dropped. I noticed I was going quite a bit further per tank compared to what I used to go with the fuel pump on there. But then I noticed after around 110, 115, which would be around 65, 70 mile an hour, the bike seemed to use more fuel than with the fuel pump, which to me means that it was flowing better into the bowl. And I found it was about the same drop between the 2.0 and the 3mm needle and seat. Because after I did the change on the to the 3mm, I did more highway riding, but it was all in the States running the higher speed limits. And so I didn't get any slow speed limit data, but I did get 75 mile an hour data, and it seemed to be about the same as the 2.0, but it seemed to be a bit worse than when I had the fuel pump. So that was just what I found. I haven't gone on my book and crunched the numbers for sure, but I noticed my gas gauge seemed to be dropping a lot faster at those speeds, and I seemed to be filling up and putting in more gas than I normally would for that mileage. So I need to do a little more testing on that and see if I can get it back to where it was or anything like that, but I didn't have time this year to dig too much deeper. So if you're wanting to try going pumpless on your bike and you have 04 or newer, and you're not sure if you're going to want to do it or not, but you want to try it, just unplug your fuel pump and then cover up the pump inlet and outlet so no dirt or anything can get in. And I would just do my side of the road bypass that I did, just pull the one line off, put a chunk of steel brake line in and shove it into the other line, make sure your gas tank's full, and just try it. I didn't find that the bike rode any different. If you have 03 and older, you can try that, but if you have a lot of issues, you'll have to get into your float level on your carb. And if you get into that, then you might as well just change the needle and seat to a bigger one if you're already that far into it. But if you have the 04 and newer, I think you'd be fine with just doing that, because that's how I got all the way back from the East Coast. And it'll give you a chance to try it, see how you like it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Or if your fuel pumps failed, I would just try it for a while and see how it goes. I haven't had any issues other than what I was talking about earlier with not enough pressure for the needle and seat to open. So I just blew in the tank, and then when I rerouted the lines, it seemed okay. And especially if I was running it just on reserve all the time, I never noticed anything different than when I had the fuel pump. It was fine, it was reliable, and had no issues at all, so that was good. So since I removed the fuel pump, I've been riding pumpless. I've put on probably around 4,000 kilometers or so. Large portion of that was coming back from my trip out east, and then some riding in the States and everything. It's been good. I'm planning on running all next summer and for the foreseeable future without a pump. I am going to do a little more testing and getting a little more data on it. I am going to keep logging my mileage like I have been and try to get as much data as I can. So if any other questions come up, I'll have answers or know which direction to point you. So, but overall, I'm pretty happy with it. It's one thing I don't have to worry about on the road anymore when I'm on trips is that pump failing. So I was carrying a spare pump with me for quite a few years now, and that spare pump, when I did put it on, it was I already had a lot of mileage on it. It was around the mileage where the pump before that had failed, so I knew that pump would be enough to hopefully get me home. And in this case, I was just too far away from home. That pump made it about 1,500 kilometers, and then it ended up dying as well. And then on the side of the road is when I originally bypassed the fuel pump to get home. And it seems pretty good, so I think I'm going to keep the bike this way. Hopefully you found this helpful, and hopefully I didn't ramble on too much, especially at the end here. So yeah, if you have any questions or anything, don't hesitate to ask me. It's been a fairly lengthy process from when I started this. I kind of did things in stages and that kind of stuff. So it's been quite a while since I started to when I finished. Things have been pretty busy in my life over the last couple months. So I've been all over the place. So I'm sure there's probably a few details that I might be forgetting that will come to me later. So don't hesitate if you have any questions to comment, and I'll respond back quick as I can. Sometimes I'm quicker than others to answer your questions. And if you if your fuel pump has failed and you do this and you decide you don't like it, you want to go back to having a fuel pump, or if you're just doing this temporarily and you're going to order a fuel pump to get you going back to factory again, make sure you buy an OEM one or a good one. I had somebody comment on one of my previous videos about replacing the fuel pump and that on it, and they're having some issues, and I helped them troubleshoot it a bit, and they ended up ordering a new fuel pump because from what I was being told, the fuel pump was bad. So they ordered a new fuel pump, put it on, the bike ran good for one ride, and then it didn't run again, and they were having the same issue. And so we went back and forth for a while and trying to figure out what it could be, and we both came to the conclusion that it still seemed like the fuel pump. And he ended up hitting the pump a couple of times and it started running again. So he ended up returning it and putting an OEM one on, and hasn't had any issues since, to the best of my knowledge. So if you are replacing your fuel pump, get an OEM one. Don't get a cheaper aftermarket one. If they make a better aftermarket one, might be okay, might not be. But with the OEM, you should be good for at least 60,000 kilometers, or I think that'd be roughly 40,000 or 45,000 miles, somewhere in that area. So you can get a brand new fuel pump aftermarket, and it might actually not be any good. It might quit right away. So I would suggest, if you're going to go fuel pump, put the OEM one back on, spend a little extra money. That's what he ended up doing, and he hasn't had any issues since. One thing I should mention too, when you're if you're running in regular and you're trying to get lower in fuel, I was tending to hit reserve a lot sooner than I normally would, or at least have symptoms of needing to go to reserve a lot quicker. And when I did switch from regular to reserve, before with the fuel pump, usually it was a couple seconds and the bike would fire back up and you'd be good to go. You just let the clutch out and it would fire up. And I find now without the pump, when I switch from reserve, or when I switch from on to reserve, that it takes quite a bit longer. It's probably at least like 15 seconds or so before the bike starts getting enough fuel. And even that, sometimes it kind of sputters and you got to clutch in and just kind of let it idle and let the fuel catch up before you can start cruising on the highway again. So just keep that in mind too. It kind of caught me off guard the first time. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification button, and also check me out on Instagram at Clara Garage. Have a great night.